Greetings, Cantaloupe here. This video is going to be covering the basics of building a user login system for a reactive application, web application. It's a Vue-based app. If you're familiar with frameworks, JavaScript frameworks, you might have heard of Vue or React or Angular. There's a few different flavors, but they all kind of have the same principle behind them. I'm going to jump right in and we'll get started. So I'm starting with an app, obviously, here that is working, except it's lacking the feature that I want, which is for users to be able to log in and save their data, their uploads, in this case, their profile, their avatar, obviously a username and password, so that we can attach all that to their profile. And what I'm going to do is implement that from scratch. I'm going to make use of a couple of components that I have used in past projects, but other than that, it's all going to be brand new code and implementation. Something about Vue components, which is a really cool feature of Vue and other frameworks like it, is they're modular. The idea is you have a separate file, usually with an isolated component, and it's reusable in more than one project. And it's very handy for things like this, where I don't necessarily need to code every time I make a website with a login prompt, a brand new login prompt. I've got one that works, I like it, it's got the buttons where they need to be, so I'm just going to, at some point, pull that into my new project, this one, and it's going to need a little bit of fine-tuning, and that's expected, but the idea is it's wired up already in a way that it's kind of plug and play, and it's really nice. So once you make a component, or if you use a third-party component, they're nice to just keep on hand. So I do that. Anyway, reactivity is just a real quick overview. If you're familiar, you can probably just skip ahead a little bit, but reactivity is a powerful feature in web design and programming. It has been around for over a decade, I believe. It's really kind of dominated the main websites of the internet nowadays. It's because it's so handy. What it does is you have a server program. Basically, I'm going to use the simplest terms I know for this. It's a server that runs on the back end. This is not your computer, the client's computer, the user's computer. It's going to be where the website lives, in a data center or on whatever computer that is. And usually it's connected to the development server, or not necessarily, I shouldn't say that. There's a production server, and then there's a development server. Sometimes they're the same machine, sometimes they're separate machines. In any case, it's not the front end, it's the back end. So Vue has, it's kind of a library, but it's more of it's a project. It's a development project, but it has a few different implementations. It's got a few different major versions at this point. I'm using Vue 3 for reference, and I'm using the CLI version. So what that is the command line interface version. I'm using all text-based stuff on the server side. I'm not using any X windows or graphical user interfaces. I'm just using the modest, humble Vim and other text editors and that kind of thing. So it works really well. I do the text editing actually in a workflow that you see here on the screen. It's I'm using a Windows computer as my client, my local client, and I'm pushing to GitHub, which is kind of it's a middleman or a go-between between my Cloud Shell, which is hosted by Google. So I'm doing my work in Notepad++. It's an open source free app, really great app. I recommend it. I save my work. I drag the folder to GitHub, commit my changes, which is nice because what it does is it stores my version, whatever version I have just uploaded, permanently until I delete it forever, potentially. So this gives you an opportunity to roll back if you make a mistake. Not to digress into the pros and cons of version management software, but GitHub is on the screen as a relevancy. So it keeps track of every change that I make, literally line by line. You can view it. But to stay on topic, I push through GitHub. It takes a snapshot of the code, forwards it to my Cloud Shell where I do the compiling. Now, this is what I was talking about Vue, the command line interface. It's gonna I made a little, or added, I should say, to the build script. It comes with a really handy build script that you can configure however you like, and you can very easily add things to it. Like I just added a simple little part that pulls. It's a git pull from this particular GitHub repository that I'm using. So it's literally 2 keystrokes on the Cloud Shell. It's going to pull my whole current repository. It's really streamlined, so it only pulls the changes. It doesn't pull all the files every time. And then it, in the same process, because it's in a script, right, it builds. And then I added a post process to the same script that pushes from there to my production servers, which happen to be some free development playground stuff that I'm using. But it uses FTP for that. It's just part of the pipeline I'm using for development. And you can have infinitely varied pipelines, and they're all equally valid as long as they do the job for you and it's satisfactory. So whatever. But back to Vue. Vue is gonna I'm using Babel and Webpack to compile. It's not actually Vue that's compiling. It's in tandem with these other technologies that are bundled together in the Vue command line program. So that it's all you can actually choose some config options when you set it up. I've already done that. You don't see that happening here in this video, but Babel and Webpack work with your framework, Vue or React or Angular or whatever, to it quickly when it's building or serving while you're developing. It will compile all of your source code, your JavaScript, your CSS, with a whole constellation of options that you might want, into a very compact, minified product. Basically, it tries to reduce the number of files, it reduces the size, it re-encodes things, and it basically turns it into the machine language version of JavaScript, which is it's difficult to read as a human. You shouldn't have to, and you don't really need to, but it's good for browsers, it's good for efficiency, and it makes your website potentially load very, very fast. So there are a lot of benefits. That's just one benefit to using this system. But the real selling point of a reactive framework is that you have a state, and this is kind of a huge opportunity for a lot of people to understand, especially even seasoned programmers. I've seen them do this wrong, and honestly, the frameworks could make it easier to understand with their documentation, but once you grasp it and you understand passing by reference and some fundamental programming stuff, it starts to make a lot of sense and it becomes very powerful. So reactivity in a nutshell is, imagine you have an array of elements. They can be containers or pictures or whatever you see on a web page. And they might be classed together somehow. You're connecting them with the state I spoke about. And depending on what you want to have happen, you can make a single change to a variable or an array, and it will instantly and transparently propagate to all of them in every part of your website, your app. What do they call them? Apps, whatever. So it's nice because you don't have to code all of this from scratch, and it does a lot of the heavy lifting, and it opens some doors for possibilities that you wouldn't even have otherwise, as far as synchronizing things and making them easier for the user. Hopefully that's the goal. That's my goal usually. Unfortunately, it seems to be a less common goal nowadays. User friendliness and making things function before they're pretty, and then making them pretty. I think people tend to get that backwards. But anyway, I'm almost done with this part of the programming. You see that I've actually implemented the user login, and it's all working, except there's just a little bug at the end here where I need to fine-tune some PHP scripts that I've included for interfacing with the database. Obviously, you need a way to record your user information. I don't collect data. I don't collect any personal information. You need at the very least a username, and that's supplied by the user, so it can be literally anything they want, within a length limit, and password, which is almost a whole separate conversation. It's they provide a password, and I don't store the password. Hopefully nobody does that anymore. There's no clear text passwords in databases because we've had enough breaches to know that that's a big no-no. Even storing hashed passwords, which is it's a big conversation. A hashed password is still hackable. Somebody can look it up, and with what's called a rainbow table. It's just basically has every possible password in it, and if they're able to try them all, they can find yours eventually, even if it's hashed. I don't do that either. So PHP offers this fun, helpful function that salts the hash so that you can't even look up with the table. It's a completely different, unique hash every time. Anyway, video's over, so there might be a part 2 to this one because I almost finished implementing the whole user login. It's not quite there. Look for part 2, there might be one. Have a good day. Thank you.